we mentioned Robert Pattinson and how he's sort of made a comeback from his Twilight days. He was in a movie a few years ago, which if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime, called Good Time.
I haven't seen it.
It's sort of like a crime movie. He's the star of it, but it is directed by the Safdie Brothers, who made the movie that you recommended to me, Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems, yes, absolutely. So, what was that? What was the year that Good Time came out?
Good Time, I think, was 2017.
2017.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So, Safdie Brothers and Uncut Gems. So this movie kind of was like, it sort of became a social media phenomenon in and of itself, just because Adam Sandler is known to have joked that if he doesn't get some kind of nomination or win an award for this one, that he'll just go back to making
Jack and Jill 3
pixel quality movies for the rest of his career, just to spite us.
Exactly.
Which kind of, to me, proves that he's been making these movies up to this point to kind of spite us. Like,
right.
What's the one with him and Drew Barrymore where it's pretty much they just go on
50
vacation?
First Dates.
There was one later on, Blended.
Blended, yeah.
Yeah, where they just go on vacation, or Grown Ups 2.
Yeah.
It's just Sandler and his friends going on vacation, and they happen to make a movie in the off time sort of thing. Or at least that's what it seems like, and that's what it feels like while you're watching it.
It annoys me because he has proven that he is a good actor with the right script and the right direction. And that's definitely a very clear case with this movie, is that he was having a lot of fun and he had a very clear idea of what he was expected to do. And the directors obviously had proven themselves with Good Time. So they know what they're doing. So they took someone who is very skilled when he's working with a very good blueprint, and they gave him a very, very excellent blueprint to work with. So for those who haven't seen Good Time, it's sort of Adam Sandler plays this jewelry...
Uncut Gems, you mean?
Yeah, Uncut Gems, yeah. He what did I say?
You said Good Time.
Good Time, sorry. Yeah, Uncut Gems.
It is a good time.
It is a good time, yeah. But Adam Sandler plays a sort of a owner of like a jewelry pawn shop.
New York City sort of jewel hustler.
Yeah.
From the like Diamond District.
Yeah.
He sells these really exotic pieces that are too gaudy for any real chain enthusiast or diamond enthusiast to wear. The Furby, and Michael Jackson on the cross.
Right.
So he's kind of just like a hustler in his own way. Like, you get the sense that he might have gotten lucky once before in his career.
Yeah.
And that sort of propelled him up to where his status is now, and he's just been hustling ever since.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a great success rate, as we've seen with this movie. He kind of makes a lot of bad decisions, and
so before I go on rant about it, I wanted to know what you thought of it.
I liked it a lot. I really coming off of Good Time, I was excited to see what they would make, and I would call this pretty much on par with Good Time. It was very, very well made, very well shot. The sound design and the direction was very great, because you have a lot of scenes where there's a lot of people talking over each other and yelling at each other, and you can still, you can tell it's chaotic, but you still get the gist of what's happening.
I was going to make that point too. Yeah, the dialogue is so naturalistic. It occurs like in reality. Like, there might be 5 people in a room, they're all talking to each other, but the 2 guys who you are most occupied on it, who the scene are about, maybe Adam Sandler and like Kevin Garnett, the basketball player, is in this movie.
Right.
And even he, he's a basketball player, but he did a great job as far as I was concerned with the acting. Like, he fulfilled the part completely. Even though he was playing himself, he did a great job, and he interacted with Sandler well.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's almost like Spielberg likes to do this too. It's almost like a parallel dialogue technique where there's a couple of different conversations going on at the same time. But if you're watching the movie, you still, what you're paying attention to, it gets resolved.
You can pick out the important bits.
And
it's
the
not
message gets across very well.
Yeah.
In a very realistic way, and the whole the dialogue in the whole movie is like that.
Yeah.
It's brilliantly done.
It's very. He also does a really great job of playing. It's sort of going back to the unlikable lead character trope. He's very unlikable and very scummy, and he does a lot of things that you're like, come on, dude, why are you doing that? But like at the same time, you're rooting for him. You want to see him get that opal back and pay off his debts, and you want to see him spend time with his family, and it just is like bad situation after bad situation after bad situation.
Right. It is definitely, the movie is definitely a portrait of a character who is not necessarily good by traditional standards, and I would even argue he's not a good person.
Right.
So I think it must have been like Tony Soprano or something like this, or maybe Walter White from Breaking Bad was a continuation of it, where the anti-hero main character trope is really becoming like a popular choice, and the movies like this kind of take it to like see how far you are willing to like almost root for this guy. And
Yeah.
even by the end of the movie, even though he's done terrible things, you still kind of root for him in the end. I mean, I guess that might be the power of Adam Sandler or the power of his performance.
Yes.
Because if you go back and watch the kind of movies that Adam Sandler used to make, they're obviously comedies. They might be kind of low effort or low brow.
I'd say most of them are pretty low effort.
Well, yeah, but you always had Sandler being sort of like the wise guy, sort of like making snide remarks, offhand comments, and like he wasn't really good at being like, he was almost more like Mike Myers than like any kind of like real like, I guess Mike Myers is leading man too, but but in Uncut Gems, Adam Sandler plays that same kind of snarky kind of character, but it's like from a different direction almost, because he's that guy, but he's that guy because of all these experiences that this character goes through that turns him into sort of like a vile character.
Right. The one thing I just thought of now was I mentioned that he is playing a very unlikable person that you still subconsciously root for, and I think that that's kind of a good flip from his previous movies, because one problem that I always have whenever I watch like an Adam Sandler comedy, aside from like the humor being like a lot of time low effort, is that he comes across as a very unlikable, kind of like insufferable character. But the movie is telling you, no, you should like him. He's the good guy. You like him, right? He's funny. You identify with him, right? And like, but he will make choices and do things that you're like, wow, that's kind of a
right. It almost
do.
Tests how far you would be willing to root for him, and then
But what I find funny is that in those movies, you're like, the movie's telling you, no, root for him, and you're like, no, I don't want to root for him. He's doing awful things. But whereas in this movie, it's like, yeah, he's doing awful things, but he's your lead.
But root for him.
But root for him. Yeah. And you're like, oh well.
It's almost the exact opposite. In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a very interesting dynamic. A real major theme in this movie is not gambling necessarily, but betting, in almost an existential sense, because he bets on, not only does he bet on sports, and he bets all the money that he has on things, like thinking that he's gonna have a big win. Like there's a part in the movie where he steals a ring from somebody and then pawns it, and then uses all that money to place a bet on him, even though he told that character he would return that ring to him later on. Yeah. He just did it because he's just a hustler, and he just needed that cash at that time, at that moment. And there's an important scene later on where he's talking to his wife, who we as viewers know that he's actively cheating on.
Yeah.
And he tells her, come on, you want to make it to Christmas? You want to make it past, like those Kanye West lyrics? Yeah. Hey, we made it to Thanksgiving. Maybe we can make it to Christmas.
Right.
Well, like, he's like, the whole movie there, it's already assumed that they're going to get a divorce as soon as the kids are old enough or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then Adam Sandler's character comes up to his wife, and they have a moment together, and he's like, do you still want to get divorced? I mean, come on. I mean, I don't think things are so bad. Like, to me, that was that character. Because this is what this character does. He judges things based on
everything.
And what he's doing by telling his wife that he's placing a bet that he can continue this charade of cheating on his wife and having the life that he has right now.
Yeah.
That's the bet that he places. Instead, you know what I mean? And that's how it is, kind of in an existential way. He is fighting the flow of the universe at almost every turn. Like, his wife wants to leave him, but he wants to double down on that and bet that, oh, we can make this work. We can stay together. Like. Yeah. And it's entirely out of selfish motivations, you know.
Exactly.
But
all of his motivations are very selfish.
And in the end of the movie, he makes a bet. He wagers that he can hold the goons there for a certain amount of time, and of course that bet doesn't hit, as you'd say.
Yeah. So that was talk about things that you're not expecting when you watch a movie. I didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that talk about I feel like that might have been the only way. You know what's funny? That ending is what the character deserved, I would argue, but it left, as the viewer, it left you kind of unsatisfied, because it's almost the opposite of what we talked about with The Wolf of Wall Street.
Right.
The ending in The Wolf of Wall Street, the ending feels kind of unfulfilled because the bad guy got away, but in this movie, or the good guy who is the bad guy got away, but scot-free. But in this movie, he doesn't get away. He sort of gets his comeuppance, even if it's from another hustler.
Right. but you don't want to see it happen.
And it's what he deserved, but you almost don't want to see it happen. Yeah. It's a weird opposite sort of situation, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was very well done movie. Like you're talking about the sound design and everything.
Yeah.
Sound design was very well. The soundtrack is. It sort of places it on an existential level. Like one moment you're floating through space,
right?
There's like gas clouds floating by you and stars, and the next minute you're going through Adam Sandler's character's colon as an intro to the character.
Yeah,
it's a very cheekily
it's like an interesting
written
way to introduce him to.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's like it's literally, hey, this guy is an asshole.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's literally exactly.
Yeah.
That's the kind of things that are so different, and yet it sends such a such a strong message.
Right.
It's right on target. It's right on point. That's the kind of thing I've never seen anything like that for an intro for a character in a movie.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
And I love how it boils down to is like you have that first 10 minutes of like we're in Ethiopia and we're watching what happens like to get these gems.
Yeah, to get the gem
that this
sets
guy
the whole thing
covets so much. And then we almost don't even talk about that first 10 minutes afterwards because it's like all this hard work just so this one sleazy asshole
in New York City
can pawn it off and make money to make a bet at a game and then lose all of it.
Yeah, to make money that he probably won't be able to hang on to for too long.
So it's almost like this Ethiopian guy who just broke his bone out of his leg and is never going to be able to work in this mine again. That sacrifice doesn't even matter because Adam Sandler is just going to lose that money in a bet.
Yeah.
An hour later. Anyway. Yeah. So it's like
that is an interesting first world, third world sort of consequence dynamic there.
Yeah. That
I think is never talked about, and that might just scratch the surface, but that's how the whole plot is kicked into motion. So
exactly,
it draws a lot of attention to it. It's very interesting.
The one thing I was going to mention too about this with the sound design, the lighting too was wonderful.
Yeah,
like those were the two aspects other than Adam Sandler's performance where I think the movie excelled very well. Like everything felt very natural. Like when he's in his
half the time you're in the diamond store.
Yeah, when he's in the diamond store, you can tell everything's like blue fluorescent lighting, and it's very like kind of cold a little bit. And then when he goes in the club, and you have all the crazy lights and stuff going off, like there's never a moment where you don't believe that you're in the setting that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Like one gripe that I have with a lot of movies is that when you have a scene that's in like a club or a bar, you'll have two people talking at like the volume that we're talking, while people are like screaming and yelling and dancing and there's loud music going on all around you, and that's just like that's not how it happens. We would be like leaning in close and like shouting to hear each other. And then so often movies don't really do that. Like the only other time I can think of off the top of my head where that doesn't happen is like Social Network, when they're in that club and he's like $1 billion is what's really cool. But
right.
Like every single time they're in a club or like they're on the streets or they're like or if they're in a car, the lighting is always very like natural to that moment. It never feels like they're not in any of those settings. And when they do go into like a club or in like a setting where there's like a whole bunch of people yelling over each other, you have the actors yelling over the background noise.
Mm-hmm.
It's never like, hey, so how was your day? As you hear like, and so I love that. Whenever a filmmaker focuses on little details like that they didn't have to notice, because like let's be honest, nobody really cares about the problem that I just had. Like that's not going to detract from a movie for most people. But when you have filmmakers who are like
they go the extra
mile to make
get
this
those little details
feel
in there.
more realistic, then it's like, okay, this is a director who has my best interests at heart and is thinking about me and thinking about things that maybe most people aren't considering.
Right.
And if it's a problem that it doesn't bother you, then it could even make you think about that. You could be like, oh, well, why do people always talk at normal volume in clubs and movies? So it's like
that's kind of silly that they even do that. Yeah,
exactly. So it's there's just so many little details about that movie that you can tell there was so much care and focus put into it that like it makes you appreciate the final product more, because they didn't have to consider a lot of those things, but they did.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah.
There's a lot in this movie like that. There's not only the lighting, but there's a lot that makes it very visually appealing. Yes, the lighting, but also the way that it's framed. There's a lot of close-ups to characters' faces in this movie where you see their initial reactions to things immediately, and it really puts things on that razor's edge. You know, it makes you wonder how is this character going to react now? Like what's going to happen next? The other thing I was going to say about it was that Sandler, it's really best if you keep Sandler out of the concept room. Like, at this point, everybody knows Sandler's strengths. It's being a wise ass, making smart remarks, and sort of acting like a little bit of a weasel with which is why this character is perfect for him.
Right.
You almost need a writer who knows what to do with, like, you need to know what you have and you need to know what to do with him.
Right.
So, the movie that I will draw closer parallels to Uncut Gems would be Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans,
right,
with Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage plays a detective, but he's very much on both sides of the law. He's a very crooked cop, and it shows a lot in common with this movie because it's very high stakes. The character is a degenerate gambler who puts a lot of stuff on the line for him and his girlfriend. Well, at the same time, he's cheating on his girlfriend, and like this, you just are put into this. You're put into the shoes of this character whose life is just a complete circus, that he's just struggling to juggle everything.
Right.
And even in Bad Lieutenant, there are there's like a strangely similar vibe with Uncut Gems, where they both sort of interfere with sports in a way to get their own way. In Bad Lieutenant, he since the movie takes place in New Orleans, he interferes with the Saints.
Yeah.
He blackmails one of the linebackers or something like that. And in this movie, it's Kevin Garnett, who believes he draws power from this gem that they unearthed.
Yeah.
And he has a better game because of it. And then when Adam Sandler gets it back, he has a lackluster game, and the character comes back for and he says, "I want that gem, I want that stone." And meanwhile, Adam Sandler's character is placing bets on that game the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just really get a sense that you are in a train where the conductor just can make turns at any time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like when as a viewer watching the movie like this with characters like that, it sort of gives you a out of control sort of feeling, and it's a good thing because it keeps you engaged, keeps you watching. You have no idea where else it can go from there. Also, if no other reason, you have to watch this movie because Adam Sandler and The Weeknd get into a fist fight.
Exactly.
And
that
is what I'm surprised didn't get on social media. Like, you've got a movie with Kevin Garnett, the star basketball player, and The Weeknd, and Adam Sandler
punches the
Weeknd.
out of
The Weeknd and Adam Sandler getting into a fight is so like that's
like a sentence you would never even think.
Yeah,
to
that's a
hear.
cultural touchstone waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Like, Adam Sandler is just out to fight Bob Barker, and The Weeknd, he's just out to fight people.
Exactly.
And
it's
I love
crazy.
it. And I love it. So what I found about Uncut Gems is, I guess I sort of spoiled it for myself a little bit by going and reading some critics' reviews before I went to go see the actual movie, which you're supposed to be able to do. You're supposed to be able to look at a critic's review and then go in there and not have your brain already burst.
Yeah.
But that's sort of what happened because I read a lot that this movie is like balls to the wall tension and you can't look away from the screen and
Yeah.
I'm curious,
Not really.
did you find it that way?
No, I was like, okay, he needs to get this stone back, and I kept on waiting for the next scene where someone was going to beat him up, but I was never like on the edge of my seat. I feel like, and that's leads to kind of like an overarching problem with the company that distributed Uncut Gems, A24. I feel like
Who also did The Lighthouse.
Did The Lighthouse, yeah, but they make really. They fund and release really great movies. They have a very good track record, I think. But they have a problem, not all the time, but sometimes they have a problem with how to market their movies to people. Like you said, with like it's balls to the wall action, and then when you watch it, it's more like, okay, we're watching Adam Sandler kind of meander around New York trying to get this diamond back.
I didn't think. Let me clarify. I didn't think it was boring by any stretch.
Yeah,
it definitely held my attention.
It's not this like.
But it's not super suspenseful.
Like,
that's why I bring in Bad Lieutenant, because I feel like there was more stakes in that movie than like if you wanted the kind of experience you would get watching this movie,
right?
And you wanted something slightly better, slightly more cranked up in terms of tension, I would say Bad Lieutenant.
Yeah, because the whole time you're like waiting for him to get caught.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this scenario, this is kind of a movie where you know that Adam Sandler is going to get caught repeatedly again and again and again before the end of the movie. You're just waiting for those scenes to happen.
Yeah.
Which again is not to say that it's bad. It's just that that's what you're expecting.
The tension in this movie, it does an interesting thing. Whereas in some other movies like Bad Lieutenant and others, the tension is slowly mounting from the beginning until there's a climax point where everything just sort of blows up. This movie, the tension rises and falls and sort of ebbs and flows and almost as needed in terms of the story, so it's totally welcome and it works. but it wasn't the anxiety fest that I was led to believe by the critics.
Yeah.
Even though that did technically get my butt in the seat, it's not super high stakes the whole time. Although there is some very teeth chattering intense moments in the movie.
Yeah.
But it shares it with moments of levity, moments where he's at home with his family for the holidays almost. I feel like that whole scene was just sort of to give the audience a breath of fresh air a little bit.
Exactly, yeah.
But as I was watching it, I couldn't help but feel like the tension could have been controlled, tapped, and cranked up a little bit more when need be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was one problem I definitely had with it, but I didn't feel like I had that same problem with Bad Lieutenant. And also to sort of cross the streams a little bit, because one thing that we kind of wanted to do was
Thank you, Egon. Very important safety tip. Thank you.
One thing that we kind of wanted to do was like have a newer movie we recommend, but also have like here's a reference point to tie it in. So technically, we're each recommending each other 2 movies per episode. Yours was Uncut Gems, Bad Lieutenant. Mine was Lighthouse, and then the director's first movie, The Witch. Just for sake of clarity for those listening, but with Bad Lieutenant, that tension was definitely there, but also again to sort of like cross the recommendations a little bit. That was also another movie that I think did comedy and drama very well. Like, you have these moments where it's like he's about to go on a drug bust, and then what the hell are these iguanas doing on this coffee table?
Yes.
Or they just murdered 3 people in cold blood, and it's like his soul is still breakdancing.
And he's like holding a revolver up to an old lady. Give me a medication or whatever. I forget what that scene is about.
Yeah. That's a complete tangent, though. But yeah, so Uncut Gems, I really, really liked. I would almost say it's almost cliched in a way, but it's not. Like, we've seen
Uncut Gems?
Yeah, we've seen this type of movie before where it's like you have a sleazy guy who's just hustling and trying to get by, and he just can't get that lucky break. But it's unique in the fact of like the way it's presented with like the wonderful sound design and the lighting and the way it's shot and
the writing
and Adam Sandler's performance. So I think that is what really makes it stand out.
That's definitely what sets it apart.
Yeah, I think Uncut Gems is definitely I would call it one of the best of the year.
I would say so too. Yeah, we might criticize it harshly, but I definitely want to see more movies like Uncut Gems, especially ones that may reignite the career of an actor that we may have forgotten about.
Right.
Because Adam Sandler did get lost in the sauce for a little bit there.
He was like the one good movie was like Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah,
and now I think
it was another serious role for him.
So I think that now we're gonna have it's gonna be Uncut Gems and Punch Drunk Love is like his 2 things. Where he did a couple other serious movies, but I think those 2 are like the big like what makes him stand out as an actor.
Yeah,
who is capable of more than just like.
Watch, he's gonna be in a Scorsese film next or something, playing a Jewish gangster or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me.